Hello there, welcome to my new Yone video. This is PBE, just to be clear. I want to talk about the new Yone builds. Now, notably most of the items are the same, but for example, Turan's Blade does provide lifesteal right now, and not 2.5 Omnivamp, which means on Qs and on basic attacks you will heal more than before. Your Q applies 100% attack speed, but before it was 33% healing only at 2.5% Omni, and now you get 100 percentage out of 3.5 percentage, which generally means you're gonna heal more on Qs. Now you don't heal on Ws, but Ws are not nearly as frequent as your Qs, and they don't deal insane damage per usual. You don't heal a teensy bit on your E and your ult because it's not Omnivamp, but I think at most it will make your early game a bit more healthy. Okay. So we went through the blade changes, right? Now the alternative is the shield in some heavy poking matchups, but again it's just at most the same as before. I think it heals a little more, but it's at most the same. So let's get straight up into the general build paths that you can go for. So usually on you only would go per usual Bork, which costs 100 gold less, and at most is the same. Except you slow on your first basic attack for 1 second, which is not too valuable if you're gonna knock someone up the slow itself, because you're gonna get only a 0.25 seconds slow, which is a bit whatever. But it helps you definitely to connect the Q more easily if you get to basic attack someone, so it's definitely still useful. And it also procs on your first basic attack. You don't need 3 basic attacks, but you don't get mobility anymore. But also notably don't the slow is not so persistent, so chasing power wise it's not as strong as before, but it definitely costs 100 less gold, which is definitely a nice thing. I would still say it's not necessarily bad, but I would generally go for Kraken just because right now Kraken is even buffed. It has actually pretty much the same components that provide the same stats as before, while also it provides 5% more attack speed, which is just nice to have a bit more frequent basic attacks and abilities. It's generally speaking just nice to have. Now okay, lol coach JP, what the hell would you build as a second item? Usually you get your rush boots, of course, usually you rush boots. But what the hell would you get as a second item? Now, Hullbreaker is not that great anymore. It actually kinda sucks. It does provide 5 more AD. That's the notable thing. It provides a bit less HP than before, 5% movement speed as before, but here's the thing. The 5th basic attacks consumes them all and it deals 72 damage, so you're gonna have more damage out of Hullbreaker because of the 5 AD plus the on-hit effect on the 5th basic attack, right? So damage wise you're gonna have more damage if you're the type of guy that likes to have damage, but it doesn't give you defensive stats, and the pushing power is kinda even or the same as you had before. Basically we can see that we'll definitely deal some extra damage on the 5th basic, but it's a bit more offensive right now than before. But also you're gonna deal 217 damage into structures, but the issue is you don't get 200% bonus damage on cannons, while also you don't get 20% bonus damage on every basic attack, so the 217 damage at the end is kinda even to the 20% damage you actually deal on every single basic attack. Maybe it's a bit more, but note that this is a bit more offensive, which is definitely great if you don't rely on the defensive stats of the Hullbreaker, but rather you want to extend your lead furthermore into sort of splitting. Now the cannon still does get defensive stats, which is nice, but it still helps you to extend your lead more easily because you'll have more damage, if damage is the thing that you value per moment. But for example, like it still provides defensive stats, right? But in comparison, there are some other interesting items that do provide defensive stats, such as Terminus. As a example, it does provide very good stats. It does provide armor and MR, while also it does penetrate armor and MR, which is actually a little bit better than Lord Dominic's, because your W, your passive and your ult can deal magic damage, and before Lord Dominic's was generally builded. But now the positive side about Terminus is really into like these very tank champs that you're gonna deal a bit more damage even on the magic damage part of your kit, right? That's definitely a useful thing. Generally, you don't want a second item it unless someone is very tank, but generally it's not too recommended in my opinion. Stormazer, generally it's not too great on Yone, it has 5 more 80, but generally speaking I would not go for it. Second item, if you really wanna go offensive, your option will be generally Infinity Edge. It's a very huge spike on Yone, as it spikes as hard as before, but it does a bit less damage of course. The Infinity Edge, right? But generally I wouldn't recommend you to go Infinity, because often in Yone it feels like that you need more defensive stats as a second item than offensive ones. But Infinity only gives damage with no flexibility compared to Hullbreaker or other alternatives. So generally speaking, Shield Bow, it's still interesting as a defensive offensive item. It definitely does more damage and provides 2% I think more lifesteal than before. It's one of those defensive offensive items, but Hellbreaker is still gonna provide it 350 HP. So I do believe that out of, because like Shield Bow heals and gives a shield, it will actually give you better defensive stats than Hellbreaker and even offensive ones. So I would actually highly recommend you guys to actually just go for Shield Bow if you wanna go defensive second over Hullbreaker, because of the crits, right? You're gonna get consistent perma crits, which you don't have with of course the Hullbreaker. I think the only advantage of Hullbreaker is probably that you can actually push towers faster, I assume, but that's really it. It doesn't really helps in duels DPS wise and defensive set wise. It has actually similar, or at certain point the shield bow shield will provide more shield than the of course the HP from Hullbreaker, but also notably 12% lifesteal is nice on Yone, because you heal on Qs and you also heal on basic attacks, so that also sort of adds to your tank stats, right? Now, okay, we went through this. Now, generally, you're gonna get Terminus pretty much always, especially if you're looking to side lane. This is a dueling item, which does provide you armor and DMR, while also it provides you armor penetration and magic penetration, so this is a generally good offensive and defensive item. This is a general item you can get on your own, but you generally want to get it after IE, because there is not much that spikes as hard as IE. In my own opinions, I wouldn't ever really like after Kraken, you kind of need to go a bit more defensive per usual on your own, because the issue is you just get one shot at. Alternatives to, of course, Shield Bow into MR and CC Gems. Probably Witsend wouldn't feel to be bad at all. And the reasoning behind that is very simple. Lots of like AP champs have CC in their kit, like almost, if you think about it, almost every AP champ has CC in their kit. Just think about one champion that's an AP champ and does not have a CC in their kit. You'll hardly find any. So tenacity is very useful. Magic resist 50, really nice. 50 attack speed, great. More magic damage in your kit, which means this is also helpful into tanks that build armor, because you're gonna have even more mixed damage in your kit. So arguably you could even second item Witsend if you're high enough level, but generally I would say go for a Shield Bow. Now okay, let's get back to the generic build path. Now KB is static useful. It's not, it's as shit as before. It's very unrecommended. Basically, Mortal Reminder, it's not the best. It gives upfront armor pen, but generally Terminus is better against bruisers tanks on the side lane. So when it comes to side laning, you wanna go for Terminus. Thing about Essence River is same as before. I wouldn't really rely on that. GA is more expensive. I could see it being a thing later on. Bloodthirster is generally not recommended, because as a melee champion in teamfights it's really easy to get under 70% HP, even in the side lane if your opponent does have damage. Collector, my bad, is as shit as before, so again it's not very recommended. What about Phantom Dancer? Now, Phantom Dancer does provide you lots of mobility, mainly you build it for mobility. This is usually never generally builded, it provides attack speed of course and whatnot. Generally you have enough mobility in your own kit, you have a E, you have your Q dash, you have your ult, so you already can get on top of your opponent, you just need to deal damage when you get on top of your opponent, so it's not really like really your thing to actually go for that type of build, right? Guinso, not, I mean, wait a second. Attack supply 30 percentage magic damage on hit. Basic attack grant 8 percentage speed stacking up to 32. While fully stacked every third basic attack applies on hit effects twice. Um, Wait, it doesn't cut your crit anymore, what? This actually doesn't cut your crit anymore, the Gwyn's Rage Blade, while also it provides double on hit effects. Interesting because your Q also counts towards stacking. Now I think it makes you squishy. Provides at most damage, the ability power is useless, 38 is a bit low, 25 attack speed. Usually you have enough attack speed. I mean, look, it's not better than Kraken as a first item, that's what I'm thinking of. I mean, interesting when you have like some own hit items like Witsend, right? Like you're gonna have a lot of magic damage, so arguably you could go Guinso or let's say Lord Dominic's or Terminus, in case you face a side laner that has a lot of armor but not necessarily a more. That will allow you to just like sort of shred. Like you see how much magic damage I deal? It's unreal amount of magic damage, right? So this build usually like helps you sort of into I assume it's not that bad right now, it doesn't nullify his crit, so I actually won't be very close-minded to it. I think Lord Dominic's is at most same as before. Yes, but I wouldn't recommend it because Terminus or Guinso is generally better into armored tanks, so I would say this is just bad. It's not that great overall. We talked about marksman items that you will generally build on your own. What about fighter items, Coach KB? We already did discuss about Hellbreaker. Now, should you build Ravenous Hydra? You already have Wave Flare on your own. Cooldown is not very useful, lifesteal is nice, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. Another bruiser item, Blade, you can probably build it. Titanic Hydra, I mean it will deal more damage than Hellbreaker, and it does provide you a big chunk of HP. So again, like interestingly enough, alternatively, you could go Titanic, it's just way more expensive than Shield Bow, and it does similar, or Shield Bow does even more damage than Titanic. This can be just a HP item, of course. Now, what about experimental hex plate? I mean, this doesn't look to be too awful because it does provide you HP. Maybe you could second item it arguably. Now, it does provide you mobility, which you already have, attack speed, which you already have enough by the time you have Kraken and, of course, Berserker. So it's not that big of a deal. I don't know. Now you get ability haste on your ult, which is kinda nice in some case scenario. If you need some extra mobility, I assume maybe in range matchups this could be arguably useful if you have a lot of range champs where you need to get a lot of ults off and the mobility and the attack speed is valuable. But I'm not really feeling this item. These items are generally not too great. I assume Maw is fine if you really need that MR, and but with Sand is I think more of a, I think it does provide more damage. Just the thing is this provides a bigger shield, right, than Maw, so it's a bit more defensive, but I usually like with Sand fits you a bit more. It's a bit cheaper, that's an advantage. While also it provides more attack damage, so ups and downs really. One provides on hit attack speed, the other one provides damage. I don't know when should you even go for it. I assume if you don't go for shield bow and while you having a more, you could arguably go for that. Sterax, what does Sterax allow you to do exactly? Generally, you don't build insane amount of HP, so this won't be too valuable on your own. Same as you only get like 47 bonus attack damage, so this is not too insane. Eclipse, I don't see it honestly. It's just bad. But as shit, not the greatest cooldown. It provides a lot of useless stats like cooldown, and you get 9% at max more damage from focus wheel, but that's not really worth. Now, should you build Thunder, I mean, this does provide you crit, but the odd thing is you actually deal less damage. That's the funny thing, especially if you have Infinity's Edge, because the first attack against the champion crits for 150%. So if you deal more damage on crit than 150%, then it can backfire damage-wise. While notably it has a 6-second cooldown, so that's that. I mean, multi-kill wise, it would be interesting in team fights because it does heal. Oh, what the fuck did I press? I pressed shift too many times, okay. Stride Breaker. Slows nearby enemies, gain 30% movement speed per champion hit. That also does it, okay. It doesn't provide damage as before. Does provide attack speed, attack damage, HP. Should you second item it if you while you having some extra chasing power, while also notably some extra movement speed. Of course it does stack, so if the more champions you're gonna hit, the more chasing power you're gonna have. Now this does actually provide you a big chunk of HP, which is actually nice. Which is actually quite nice about it. Chasing power, which is again nice. That 30% slow will definitely allow you to connect more queues. So I assume maybe there is a word where you do go for that item. I'm just not sure how to exactly feel about it, but I think there is a word where you go for this just for the extra chasing power and mobility. I've seen one of the pros actually going quite frequently in solo queue on this Stride Breaker item before changes. I think it was Chovy, or I'm not sure exactly who. I wouldn't really be too close-minded to Stride Breaker, of course. Maybe some games you just really need that extra speed up and slow. But okay, let's move on to another item, Trinity Force. Now, Trinity Force is also interesting. I'm gonna talk shortly about that, but let's just go through the items step by step. Sherilda, don't go for it. It only gives you a slow under 50%, which makes it automatically just kinda shit. Pork is fine in scenarios, of course, as I said. That's Dance. Now, it's fine if it actually does matter, the ignore pain, right? So if you can kill people, you can shred off those negative true damage of yourself and heal yourself. Like, I could see it being an item that's like decent against AD champs, where you kinda like wanna delay or that and get a reset, and then that definitely helpful. But into poke I wouldn't recommend it. So that stance is pretty much the same as before, to be honest. Revenus I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but you can get it for dopamine or for montage videos, but it's not really me. What else? Now, Titanic Hydra gives you an auto reset, which is nice towards your passive and towards your Kraken, which again also procs on your Q, but ideally you want to use it as an auto reset. So as the HP defensive item, usually it's not bad, while also Trinity Force doesn't feel to be bad as a second item that does provide you HP, because similar to AD carries that go for Trinity Force, say for example Ezreal and Ashe players realized, oh shit, for example Guinsoo might not be that great on Ashe, and on Ezreal it might not be good to go Permadeath Blade and Essence River or whatnot. The same logic applies to Yone, that 300 HP is actually really valuable. AD is nice, health, and the good thing is that you get to proc on every Q basically the 1.5 second spell blade passive, which just your Q comes up slightly faster, so you gotta be a teensy bit careful with that, but it's not necessarily bad overall DPS wise, and it also allows you to sort of have a bit of a better wave clear. So notably this will be your defensive offensive second item in my opinion, which is better for a certain period of time than Shield Bow, until Shield Bow's shield does actually outscale sort of the Titanic's HP that it does provide. But we can see like Titanic does provide shit ton of damage, so I would say like definitely like you could overall just like go Shield Bow, I think, and then maybe later on, like after Shield Bow, you can like decide yourself, should I go IE? Do I wanna build more HP because I get wiped? Do I wanna build MR? Do I wanna build this? Do I wanna build that? Because Yone generally has a lot of damage. The issue is his squishiness, that's what I've been all the time saying. So you actually gotta fix your squishiness. It's not necessarily about that, oh my god, I need to deal more damage, I need to deal more damage, to the point where you just get one-shotted with more damage, then it just doesn't even make sense, right? Are there any good assassin items, local JB? Not really, in fact lots of them are kind of shitty one for assassins. There is one item called Energizer, which is an interesting item, I would say. Maybe I could maybe see this being something. So you basically energize, right? And Yone has plenty of dashes to energize quite quickly, right? Let's just energize ourselves up, right? And so it does provide 100 damage, and it slows people for 0.75 seconds. Now what does that allow you to do? It allows you to connect your Q and ult way more smoothly, especially your third Q. So let's say I wanna, let's go like to maybe top lane or some place, you know, like let's say mid lane, right? Right. So let's say I energize myself up. We could also get off minions like 2 stacks of passive, but I guess we can do that, right? It doesn't proc some minions, I hope it does proc, okay. So we're gonna walk around a little. So as we can see, the slow is quite heavy, so it definitely does allow you to proc quite quickly a passive, and you can see that these energizing effects are quite frequent, so it does give you some extra stickiness and also more likeliness to actually connect your Qs. But I would say this is again sort of a montage, sort of a like lethality is not the most useful stat on Yone, doesn't provide defensive stats. Cooldown is not the most useful stat on Yone. 100 damage is probably doesn't feel to be bad, but Kraken already does damage and many other items. So I would say maybe this is sort of a, you know, sort of a normal game, sort of a montage maybe item, but generally unrecommended. Hubris, again, it's not very useful, probably for like normal games montages, because you're gonna stack a lot of AD. But again, it's not a consistent item, while also it doesn't provide you enough like juice to go for it. Axiomar, again, it's just like ult spam, collector, same thing, normal game, maybe montage items, because people see huge numbers from collector, so they're gonna be like, oh shit, this does so much damage. I mean, in reality it only executes people under 5% HP, but you know, people see huge damage numbers, so they're gonna be like, oh my god, what the hell is that? Now, Profane Hydra, you cannot build Profane Hydra if you have what? If you have Titanic Hydra, right? Now what does Profane Hydra give us? Lethality, cooldown, which is already shit. Attacks deal physical damage to nearby enemies, deal physical damage, so it gives better wave clear, which you already have on Yone, so it's not very useful. Spell shield, it's useful into a Vayne, but I wouldn't really recommend it. I mean, not the greatest useful into an Annie, but I don't know. You can just build Witsend into an Annie or something, right? Mage items, I don't fucking know, honestly. I think most of them are just bad. Like, they're just like bad, to be honest. Like all of them, I think they're just bad. I wouldn't even like consider them being something. Now tank items, okay, tank items, so they provide definitely more defensive stats than a Titanic, right? Now the only issue is with the tank items themselves, that they only provide defensive stats with no offensive stats as other items like Terminus, Titanic, and so on, like Shield Bow, so they're not very flexible into damage. They just basically, what they do is just very simple, you know, just like it's just like some funny amount of damage. Now Iceborne does like damage, it provides you slow, but it's kind of shit slow if you don't have enough HP. And again, I'm level 18, that's why we get 26%, but if I would second item Iceborne or something, it would be even low. So because like the slow effect is so shit low, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. Abyssal Mask gives you a cheap form of like a MOR, but again, Witsend is just there, they're just much stronger. Don't know how to feel about Abyssal, not really a Yone item, it's a team amp item, right? Not very Yone items in general. I could say this against a Tryndamere or something, like crit champs in general, if you want extra defensive stats, is definitely not bad. I mean, 30% less crit damage is definitely a really nice stat to have. Don't see it, mobility is not a necessity on your making or dealing damage, because it to begin deal damage per second. To nearby enemies increased, it's basically dealing damage, refreshes the duration. Killing an enemy, magic damage and random. Yeah, so this is like a tank item overall. I mean, this doesn't really like provide you anything. The only like tank item I sort of like is Force of Nature, because it provides you lots of mobility. I mean, definitely it provides you lots of magic resist, HP. So this is something I could like arguably see on your own. But now many of the tank items are very useful. Support items are just as shit as before. Uh, they're not very useful. Maybe I'm close-minded about them, but I checked them out even earlier and they're not very useful. They aren't, honestly. So this provides you a wave clear sort of, but it does like very low amount of damage, so it's mostly a tank item. Again, it only does this amount of damage, 52, because I'm level 18, so it's not gonna be much in the real game. Then against like dummies, it does like a little bit of damage, I assume, per second, but it's not gonna be much, so I wouldn't really necessarily recommend it. It's more so a tank item. I wouldn't really consider it to be a thing on your own. But yeah, I think we talked about at most everything in here. Don't think so there is anything else to discuss. Should we even discuss about like what Eclipse? I didn't really talk about Eclipse. Serpent's Fang does provide you now 50% shield card, but usually you don't want to build it on your own. Usually your Javan or someone else wants to build it. Eclipse, think why I said like Eclipse is not the greatest. It does provide 70-80, but ability haste is a bit shit. This only comes up like every 6 seconds and it's only 6% bonus physical damage, which is nothing. 153 shield, but the thing is I'm max level and I have 2 items, that's why it's only 153. Usually it's a very shit low amount of shield that you're gonna get. So at that point, like, you get more value out of shield, bow shield in and all in and out of his healing. So I wouldn't really be considerate about, of course, going for the other item. But yeah, so let's wrap up the whole thing. What should you generally build? So more than often you're gonna start out the game with a Kraken. Right, very simply, you're gonna go for a Kraken. Then it's easy to decide what you want to do depending on your matchup. More than often you want to actually optimize into defensive stats, not offensive stats. But if you want to have a mixture of it, you can go for Titanic Hydra, which gives an interesting amount of damage and defensive stats, because it does provide a lot of HP. Alternatively, side lane wise, now pushing, like, it does provide similar pushing power to Titanic Hydra, because the Titanic Hydra's on hit effect does actually apply to structures. It just doesn't like shockwaves around them, right? I believe that's how it works. Yeah, it's applied to structures, so it will actually deal similar amount of damage as Hellbreaker. It's just the thing about Hellbreaker is that it does more damage. Does it even do more damage? That's what I'm thinking of. Like, does it even, it empowers a minion, which is a thing, but does it even, like, that's kind of nice if they have wave clear, but does it even like do more damage? Because its damage is kind of even. I think Titanic does a bit more. It just costs more at the same time, right? So okay, so damage wise, again, probably Trinity Force gonna be the best. Titanic gonna deal a bit softer amount of damage, even though the activatable does more damage, but the Trinity Force's activatable is more frequent, plus it provides attack speed and it does provide a bit less damage on hit than the Titanic Hydra. It's just like the thing is very simple. Attacks apply additional 36 and deal physical damage. Yeah. So it's only like 36. Generally, if you wanna have more damage and some defensive stats, you're gonna go Trinity Force. This is a very general build you can go for. Against range matchups, I would recommend, if you really need that extra chasing power and attack speed, I could see Experimental Hexblade being a thing, because this is how it looks like as a example. Let's get out of the base. Let's sell like this. This does provide some damage, Experimental Hexblade, and some chasing power. That's the whole thing about it, right? But more than often you won't necessarily need it, right? So with E combined, you have quite a lot of mobility, and you have quite a lot of damage, and your ult is very frequent, because generally speaking, to kill a ranged matchup, you need to have your ultimate as much up as possible, and it does provide like 30 ability haste for your ultimate, because generally you don't need ability haste on your own. So this is actually really good that it's targeted towards your ultimate. So this does have actually snowball power because of your frequency of your ults, while your aurings are very potent in case you value more mobility. Other hand, the other items are very situational. Infinity's Edge, it's a general item on Yone, of course, that you can pretty much every game go for. I think it's a bit greedy to second item it in my own opinion. Then again, depending on what do you need to build, of course, I can't really tell you guys straight up examples, but Terminus is good every game, Infinity is usually good every game. Then the rest of the items are more than often situational, depending on what do you want to do, what do you want to like like it's like how it's like hard to explain to me, but it's just like situational. That's my simple point, right? It's very like situational of what do you want to do. Even when it comes to side laning, Hullbreaker is useful, but you gotta remember this is also useful in team fights, because right now it doesn't turn off in team fights, right? So if you're sieging with Baron, when you empower the cannon minion, that's gonna definitely be really valuable, because the enemy mage can't really kill it from far away. That's definitely valuable sieging wise and closing out games, right? So you can definitely build it in some games. I could see it being a thing, especially useful into tanks, because they have a hard time to destroy, of course, the cannon minion. So Jin, I said they're already shit. Situational item, Mercury Threads, which I didn't talk about, but it just basically works the same as before, just a situational item. With Sand, really good situational item. Gwyn's Rage Blade, again, if your opponent doesn't build necessarily, how's called, let's say he's like a AP tank, he does AP damage, right, and he does spam, let's say like armor, but he doesn't get so much MR, then you could go for this mixture of a build, which will allow you to have lots of magic damage, as I showcased before. So this will a bit complicate for you the builds, of course, but you're gonna have a lots of magic damage. Generally, I don't recommend Mortal Reminder and Lord Dominic, just because how strong Terminus is, or you can already have quite a lot of magic damage out of Guinso and Vitsand. So I don't know if I should even recommend. These two are generally not too great compared to the alternatives. Even if they have healing, generally you don't want to get this on your own, except if it's like an Aatrox maybe or something really important, but generally you don't get it unless everyone is stubborn in your team and nobody wants to build it. Storm Laser, now it does provide you 5 more damage than before. 5? Or is it 5 or 15? I'm not even sure how much the Storm Laser provides right now. I think it's 55, right? It's 5 more damage than before. The damage is not too high. Again, we are like level 18 with full build, and it only provides 162. Definitely like damage. It provides you a bit of mobility, but again, like perma repeating myself, that Yone does have already enough mobility, and often you're gonna knock up people, so with that 1 second amount of mobility you won't do shit when you already are on top of the enemy champions. They are CC, they are not moving anywhere, so that's the general thing, you know. Like okay, now what else? I already talked about the bruiser items, I already talked about the same situational, of course, tank items that you can go for. Heartsteel, I didn't talk about it, but I don't really see it being too great on your own. It's kind of a dopamine item if you wanna go for it in normal games or YouTube montages where people click on it. Yone with Titanic, oh my god, new build. He has 3k HP or 4k HP or whatnot. But it's just really for clickbait YouTube videos, honestly. Then PD, I think I generally talk about anything. Nashor's is not great, even though it's in the legendary section in the marksman, right? I think that's it for now, guys. Have a nice day, and if you like this content, definitely aim to leave a like in the live comment section, and aim to subscribe if you want to see similar content to this. Have a nice day.